This last video on inequalities and stratification systems is dealing with the stratification systems themselves. We have looked at the theorists, Karl Marx, Max Weber, Georg Simmel, Bourdieu, Parsons, I think we did Parsons, and then we looked at other stratification issues and definitions, and now we're going to look at the primary systems that society has used to stratify. So this is a quick look at some of the stratification systems from other cultures: Viking systems, Japanese systems, Indian caste systems, Egyptian pharaoh systems. I know there's a better word for that, but it's Egyptian pharaoh systems. And this should reiterate what we talked about on another slide or another video, that stratification systems are universal but variable. Every society divides itself into groups, and depending on whatever categories they decide are the dividing portions, and then they allot power, money, resources to those groups in differing amounts. So stratification systems are universal but variable. They are structural, they are outside the individual, and they are often bolstered by ideologies. So the stratification systems themselves are slave system, caste system, and class system. We will start with slave systems. Slavery is the ownership of some people by others. Now, one of the issues we find in capitalism is we have had ownership slave systems in capitalism, obviously, because we did before the Civil War, and even after, if you're looking at some of the sharecropping. However, what we see now is more human trafficking, which is not ownership, but more trapped, charging a fee that they can never pay. So almost like indentured servitude, but not necessarily physical ownership with a piece of paper of people by others. It's more ownership of a debt over somebody that can never be repaid. So slavery itself in a specific slave system, the ownership of some people by others. Causes of slavery, historically speaking: debt, crime, war and conquest. In the Americas, however, after the globalization and colonization happened, slavery became a way of labor, a way of acquiring labor, which is different than debt, crime, war and conquest. I mean, they were acquiring labor, but it wasn't to the extent and for the purposes that it was in that time period. And the conditions of slavery, in some cases it was temporary, was not always inheritable, so children of slaves were not always slaves. And then especially in the Roman system, slaves were not powerless and poor. If you were a slave within the Roman system, you were not a citizen, so you were a slave, and maybe you were somewhere in northern France working as a blacksmith in some village, and the Romans came through, the army came through, they conquered your village, and they would just make everybody slaves, but they would keep doing what they were doing. So they were a slave to the Roman system, they were a slave to the Roman government, they would be owned by particular Roman citizens, but their everyday life did not change all that much in some of these areas. So slavery in some of the systems that were originally slave systems, Roman systems, Greek systems especially, the slave system was expected. It was the system, and there was nothing in their ideology that would contradict their system. Nothing like all men are created equal, nothing like that that's going to contradict the system that's already in place. So most slave systems historically have been that. Now, this is a good example of the ownership and the commodification of bodies. It's a flyer, basically, and you go to the store, right? You go to Kroger, someplace, you have your list, you buy some things, commodities, rice, books, muslins, needles, pins, ribbons, etc., and slaves. Slaves were viewed purely as commodity. There were books on animal husbandry, basically, for slaves, how to mate them with each other and how to strengthen your population as though you were strengthening a herd of sheep. So very, very depersonalized, especially within a culture that says all men are created equal. Then the slaves cannot be people. in that case. Slaves have to be unpeopled. There are a couple, well, 3 really good documentaries that I've been watching. They're all on Amazon Prime somewhere. You might have to bury your dig really deep, but one of them is Slavery, the Building of America. I've been watching that one, narrated by Morgan Freeman. Really, really, really good. There's one that's a PBS documentary, Reconstruction, and then a PBS documentary, Many African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. All of these together are amazingly well done documentaries that put the history of slavery within the context of history and where does it lead to today, where did it come from, what were different ways of confronting it historically speaking. So 3 amazing documentaries if you get a chance to watch them. And then when we're looking at new slavery in the global economy, we're looking a lot at human trafficking, but it still exists, disposable people. We have human trafficking cases in the United States, in the city of Huntsville from time to time, where people are brought in with the promise of employment and they pay a fee and they can never pay that fee off. So caste systems are a little bit different. They are stratification systems based on ascription or ascribed statuses. You are born and that birth determines your social position in pretty much all ways. Your birth determines everything. If you're playing a Sims game and you want to have a very, very stable system, if you want the most stability you can get and you don't care about inequality at all, have a caste system because they are incredibly stable. If you look at the Indian caste system 9,000 years ago, they basically decided what families would do what from a functionalist perspective, which families would care for the dead, which families would handle money, which families would do health and medicine, which families would be builders, which families would be warriors, and replicated that system for thousands and thousands of years. Now the caste system is illegal, but elements survive, especially in honor killings. There have been more than one case, one I read about recently, of young women in higher castes falling in love with young men from lower castes, and the woman's family will murder the man because they cannot stand the idea of somebody in their family bringing in that blood, basically, bringing in the blood from a lower caste and polluting the family. So caste systems are technically illegal, but elements survive, and they are incredibly stable and difficult. And a belief system is often tied to religion, which makes it even more compelling. In the caste system in India, it was tied to the religion in the sense that whatever caste that you were born into as a human being today on this earth, or whenever on this earth, is a direct consequence of how you were in a former life. So if you are born an untouchable, that's punishment for your former life. If you are born in the highest class, that is a reward for your former life or lives that you have had. And how can you really argue with that? Can you really go back and look at your former life and say, actually, I was a really nice person. That was great. You can't. There's no way to make that argument at all. And that's what ties that. It's tied so incredibly close to religion that there is no argument. And that's what's keeping the vestiges of it alive. You can change the laws. You cannot change the norms, values, beliefs. Those follow so much slower. Class systems. Class systems are based on both birth and achievement. There is supposed to be social mobility for people with education and skills. All people gain equal standing before the law. Now, this is in words. If you look at Karl Marx and capitalist systems and stratification systems and how people in power retain their power, etc., 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 it never plays out, but the words are there. In a caste system, the words would not be there. In a feudal system, the words would not be there. In a slave system, the words would not be there. So the words are there. They don't apply to everybody equally, but they're there in a class system. So you will hear that class system, everybody is equal, everybody starts from the same place. Our mythologies, our stories about ourselves right here begin with the class system. Work involves some personal choice. We have meritocracy. Where you end up is supposed to be on you. you survived, you prospered, you are rich now, whatever it is, you gamed the system, you managed to become rich. It's you. If you are homeless, it's you. We have very little room for structural ideologies. Now, caste system is all structural, right? You are born into the family and you do those things that your family does. You have no way out of that. That's just the way it is. Luck of birth, or how you did in your past life. Class systems are supposed to be more choice driven. They're supposed to be more free, much more individualistic. You can be whatever it is that you want to be. But class systems still have that overriding Marxist infrastructure, superstructure thing. If you have an economic system of capitalism, then your class system is going to be incredibly unequal. And everything about that class system is going to bolster the capitalist class. So even if we have these things, social mobility, social, meritocracy, choice, equal standing theoretically, it's still not for everybody. So that's all we have on class systems, and we will start up with other inequalities very soon.